The hum of the Changi Airport Premier Lounge was a symphony of hushed conversations and clinking glasses, a world away from Ilara's reality. Then a discordant note, a child's raw, desperate sob. Alone amidst the plush velvet and gleaming chrome, a little boy wept, his small shoulders shaking. Every rule screamed at Ilara, the overworked waitress, to call security to not get involved. But something in his despair mirrored her own quiet struggles. A simple act of kindness, a whispered word, a shared crayon. She had no idea this moment would unravel her ordinary life and lead to the polished gleam of a waiting limousine. The Premier Lounge at Singapore Changi Airport was Ilara's stage 5 nights a week, a stage where she played the role of the ever-attentive, almost invisible waitress. She navigated the sea of expensive briefcases, designer handbags, and the low murmur of privileged voices, with a practiced ease that belied the exhaustion clinging to her like cheap perfume. Tonight, a Tuesday, was particularly dragging. The air, usually thick with the scent of premium coffee, and an undercurrent of jet fuel, felt heavy, almost suffocating. Ilara was refilling a senator's water glass, offering her practiced, polite smile when she heard it. A sound so out of place in the curated calm of the lounge, it was like a scratch across a priceless vinyl record. A child's cry. Not a petulant whine, but a deep, heart-wrenching sob that seemed to carry the weight of the world. She scanned the lounge. Most patrons, ensconced in their leather armchairs, either hadn't noticed or were pointedly ignoring it. Her gaze landed on a small figure huddled in a large armchair in a more secluded corner, partially obscured by a decorative ficus tree. A little boy no older than 5 or 6 was crying as if his heart was breaking. His smart little blazer was rumpled, his face tear-streaked and pale. He was utterly alone. Ilara's heart gave a painful throb. Her training, her supervisor, Mr. Henderson's stringent rules, dictated she should immediately inform lounge security or the front desk. VIP guests are not to be disturbed by staff unless explicitly requested. Henderson's reedy voice echoed in her memory. And unattended children are a security matter, not a hospitality one, Miss Vance. Ilara's surname was Vance, a common enough name, yet one that felt heavy with the ordinariness of her life. But the sheer desolation on that child's face bypassed all protocols. She saw in his eyes a reflection of her own youthful loneliness, a time when the world had felt too big and too indifferent. She glanced towards the front desk. Anika, the unflappable receptionist, was busy with a dignitary. Mr. Henderson was nowhere in sight, probably schmoozing in the first-class section. This was her chance, or perhaps her folly. Taking a deep breath, Ilara approached the boy. She knelt, bringing herself to his eye level. "Hello there," she said, softly, her voice gentle. "Are you all right, little one?" The boy flinched, his sobs catching in his throat. He looked up at her, his big brown eyes wide with fear and confusion. He clutched a small worn teddy bear to his chest as if it were a life raft. He didn't speak, just shook his head. Fresh tears welling. "My name is Ilara," she continued, keeping her tone soothing. "What's yours?" He remained silent, his gaze fixed on her name badge. "That's a very special bear you have there." Ilara tried again, nodding at the teddy. "Does he have a name?" A tiny, almost inaudible whisper. "Leo." "Leo the bear. That's a wonderful name. And what about you, brave explorer? Are you waiting for someone?" The boy who Ilara now assumed was also named Leo nodded his lip, trembling. He pointed a small, uncertain finger towards the large glass windows overlooking the tarmac where planes landed and took off like giant, graceful birds. "Your mummy or daddy are on a plane?" Elara asked. He nodded again, then buried his face in Leo. The bear, his shoulders starting to shake anew. Hey, Elara murmured, an instinct to comfort overriding any professional caution. "I'm sure they'll be here very soon. This lounge is for people waiting just like you." She knew she was already breaking several rules. Staff weren't supposed to sit with guests, especially not unattended minors. But leaving him felt cruel. "Are you hungry, Leo?" she asked. "We have some yummy cookies or maybe some fruit." He peeked at her, a flicker of interest in his tear-filled eyes. Elara smiled. It was a start. She quickly fetched a small plate with a couple of chocolate chip cookies and a glass of apple juice from the service station, her eyes darting around for Henderson. Still clear. She returned to Leo, placing the offering on the low table beside him. "Here you go. My treat." Leo hesitantly reached for a cookie, his small hand still trembling. He took a bite, then another. The crying subsided into sniffles. Elara remembered the small notepad and pen she kept in her apron pocket for orders. She pulled them out. "You know," she said conspiratorially, "while you wait sometimes drawing helps the time go faster. Would you like to draw something with me?" Leo's eyes, less clouded by tears, now fixed on the notepad. He gave a small, tentative nod. Elara tore off a sheet. "What should we draw?" "Maybe Leo the bear is going on an adventure." For the first time, a tiny ghost of a smile touched the boy's lips. He took the pen she offered his grip, surprisingly firm for such a small child, and began to sketch. Elara watched him, a strange sense of peace settling over her, despite the potential trouble she was undoubtedly courting. His dark hair fell over his forehead as he concentrated, his tongue poking out slightly from the corner of his mouth. He wasn't just doodling. He was drawing, with an unusual focus lines forming into a surprisingly detailed airplane, with Leo the bear peeking from a window. "That's amazing, Leo," Elara praised genuinely. "You're a real artist." He looked up, and this time his smile was real. A small, beautiful sunrise in the sterile landscape of the lounge. It was then that Mr. Henderson chose to materialize. "Miss Vance," his voice sharp and laced with displeasure, cut through the quiet moment. "What on earth do you think you are doing?" Elara straightened up immediately, her brief sense of peace shattering like a dropped crystal. Mr. Henderson stood before them, his thin frame rigid with indignation, his spectacles perched precariously on his sharp nose. His eyes magnified by the lenses flickered from Elara to Leo, then back to Elara. His disapproval a palpable force. "Henderson, wait." Elara began, her mind racing for a plausible explanation that wouldn't sound like a complete dereliction of her duties. "You are fraternizing with a guest, Ms. Vance. An unattended minor, no less. Have you forgotten every single protocol I've drilled into your head?" His voice was a low hiss, designed not to carry to other patrons, but it stung Elara more than a public reprimand would have. Leo, startled by the harsh tone, shrank back into the armchair, his eyes wide with renewed fear. He dropped the pen and clutched Leo the bear tightly, the half-eaten cookie forgotten. "Sir." "The child was distressed," Elara explained, trying to keep her voice calm and respectful. "He was crying alone. I was just trying to comfort him until his parents could be located." "Comforting him?" Henderson scoffed, his gaze sweeping over the cookies and juice the notepad. It looks more like you've set up a nursery. Your job, Ms. Vance, is to serve paying customers, not to play nanny. You should have alerted the front desk or security immediately. This is a breach of conduct, a serious one." "I was about to, sir," Elara lied, a flush creeping up her neck. "I just wanted to ensure he wasn't overly panicked." Henderson was unmoved. "The state of the child is not your primary concern. The integrity of this lounge and the adherence to its rules are. What if this child belongs to someone in particular? Someone who doesn't appreciate staff overstepping their boundaries." He gestured vaguely, implying the unseen but ever-present hierarchy of VIPs. Elara bit her lip. He was right, of course, from a purely procedural standpoint. But looking at Leo's small, frightened face, she couldn't bring herself to regret her actions. "What is the child's name?" "Who is he with?" Henderson demanded, turning his sharp gaze on Leo, who cringed. "His name is Leo, sir," Elara said quickly, protectively. "He indicated his parents were on an incoming flight." "He hasn't said their names." Henderson sighed dramatically. "Useless. Right, Ms. Vance, return to your duties. Immediately. I will have Anika make an announcement and contact airport security to deal with this situation." The way he said "this situation" made Leo sound like a piece of lost luggage. Elara wanted to argue to stay, to reassure Leo that everything would be all right. But Henderson's glare was icy. One more misstep, and she could lose her job, a job she desperately needed, despite its thankless nature. The rent for her small HDB flat in Bedok was due, and her younger sister's school fees weren't going to pay themselves. "Yes, Mr. Henderson," she murmured, her gaze lingering on Leo for a moment. He looked so small and vulnerable. She gave him a tiny, almost imperceptible nod of encouragement before turning away. The boy's eyes followed her, filled with a silent plea that twisted her insides. As she walked away, resuming her rounds of clearing glasses and offering refills with a plastic smile, she could hear Henderson's curt tones as he spoke into his lapel microphone, presumably to Anika or security. She tried to block it out to focus on the tasks at hand, but her mind kept replaying Leo's tear-streaked face. His initial fear and the brief, precious moment of connection they had shared over a drawing of a bear in an airplane. The lounge seemed colder now, the low hum of conversation more irritating than soothing. Every few minutes, her eyes would stray towards the corner where Leo sat. She saw Anika approach him, her professional smile firmly in place. Anika was kind, but she was also a stickler for rules. She spoke to Leo for a few moments, then returned to her desk, a slight frown on her face. No security personnel appeared immediately. An announcement crackled over the lounge's PA system, a smooth, feminine voice requesting the parents or guardians of a young boy named Leo to please make themselves known to the front desk. The announcement was repeated 3 times in English and Mandarin. Silence. No one came forward. Elara felt a knot of anxiety tighten in her stomach. Where were his parents? An hour passed, then another. Leo remained in the armchair, no longer crying, but a picture of dejection. He hadn't touched the rest of his cookie or his drawing. Anika had placed a blanket over him, and he seemed to have dozed off, his dark hair falling over his forehead, his small hand still gripping Leo the bear. Elara's shift was nearing its end. She was exhausted, her feet ached, and the encounter with Henderson had left a bitter taste in her mouth. As she tidied her station, preparing for the handover to the night staff, she couldn't shake the image of the sleeping child. It was highly unusual for a child to be left unattended for so long in such a secure environment. Just as she was about to clock out, she saw movement near Leo. 2 airport security officers, looking stern and official, were now standing by his chair, speaking quietly with Annika. One of them gently tried to rouse Leo. Elara paused her hand on the door to the staff locker room. This was it. They would take him to a designated airport facility for lost children. It was the proper procedure. He would be safe. Yet a profound sense of unease settled over her. It felt wrong, unfinished. She thought of the drawing still lying on the table. Leo the bear flying home. With a sigh, she turned to leave. What more could she do? She was just a waitress. Elara had just changed out of her uniform, the stiff fabric a welcome relief, and was gathering her belongings from her locker. The thought of the crowded MRT ride back to Bedok filled her with a familiar weariness. All she wanted was a hot shower and the oblivion of sleep. As she stepped out of the staff area, intending to head for the airport's public exit, she instinctively glanced towards the Premier Lounge's entrance and stopped. A couple stood there speaking with Annika in urgent, hushed tones. They were impeccably dressed, radiating an aura of wealth and understated power that was common enough in the lounge, yet there was an intensity about them that set them apart. The woman was tall and elegant, her blonde hair swept into a chic chignon, her face etched with worry. The man beside her was dark-haired with a sharp suit and an air of controlled urgency. He exuded authority. Could these be Leo's parents? Elara lingered hidden from their direct view by a large potted palm. She saw Annika gesture towards the corner where Leo had been. The couple moved swiftly in that direction, their anxiety palpable. Elara's heart, which had been heavy with concern for the boy, felt a small lift. He wouldn't be alone much longer. She saw the woman rush forward, kneeling beside the armchair where Leo was still sleeping now, with one of the security officers standing watchfully nearby. The man stood a little behind her, his hands clasped, his gaze fixed on his son. Elara allowed herself a small, relieved smile. It seemed the crisis was averted. She turned to leave her part in this small drama concluded. She had her own life, her own problems waiting for her. "Ms. Vance." Elara froze. It was Mr. Henderson's voice, but it lacked its usual sharp edge. It sounded strained. She turned to see him approaching, his expression uncharacteristically flustered. "Ah, Miss Vance, just the person. Could you, spare a moment?" This was highly unusual. Henderson usually couldn't wait to see the back of his staff once their shifts ended. "Is there a problem, Mr. Henderson?" Elara asked, a new unease prickling at her. Had she forgotten to complete some task? Was this about Leo again? "No, no problem. Not exactly." Henderson fidgeted with his tie. "They are parents of the child, Mir and Mrs. Alistair. They specifically asked to speak with the staff member who first assisted their son." Elara blinked. "They did Yes," Henderson said, avoiding her eyes. "They are rather influential individuals. It seems your unorthodox methods didn't go unnoticed." He cleared his throat. "They're waiting in my office, if you wouldn't mind." A mix of apprehension and curiosity churned within Elara. Why would such important people want to speak with her? Was she about to be commended or condemned? Given Henderson's earlier tirade, she suspected the latter perhaps a formal complaint that would seal her fate. With a sigh, she nodded. "All right, Mr. Henderson." She followed him back through the staff corridors, to his small utilitarian office. The couple she had seen earlier were seated inside, looking even more formidable up close. The woman who introduced herself as Isabel Alistair had kind eyes despite her worried expression. The man Julian Alistair nodded curtly, his gaze intense and scrutinizing. "Miss Vance," Isabel Alistair began, her voice soft, but carrying an undercurrent of emotion. "Thank you for agreeing to see us. We wanted to personally thank you for looking after our son Leo." Elara was taken aback. "Oh, it was nothing, really. I just tried to keep him calm." "It was far from nothing, Ms. Vance." Julian Alistair interjected, his voice deep and resonant. "Leo, he doesn't talk to strangers easily. He has been through a difficult experience recently. For him to trust you to even interact with you, that's significant." "We were unavoidably delayed," Isabel explained, her hand instinctively going to her chest. "A last-minute diversion of our flight due to a technical issue. We were frantic. The thought of him alone." Her voice wavered. "The lounge staff informed us you were with him for some time." Julian continued, "that you drew with him." He gestured towards a piece of paper on Henderson's desk. It was Leo's drawing of the bear in the airplane. "He hasn't drawn like that so freely in months." Elara felt a blush creep up her cheeks. "He's a very talented boy. He was just scared and lonely." "Indeed," Julian said, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Mr. Henderson has explained the lounge protocols." He glanced pointedly at Henderson, who suddenly looked very uncomfortable. "While we understand the need for rules, we are immensely grateful for your compassion, Ms. Vance. You showed him kindness when he most needed it." Isabel reached into her handbag and pulled out an envelope. "We wanted to offer you a small token of our gratitude." She held it out to Elara. Elara hesitated. "Oh no, I couldn't possibly. It's my job to help guests." "Please," Isabel insisted gently. "You went above and beyond. This is the least we can do." Reluctantly, Elara took the envelope. It felt thick. She didn't dare open it in front of them. "Thank you," she murmured, feeling overwhelmed. "How is Leo now?" "He's still a bit shaken, but he's asking for you, actually," Isabel said, a warm smile lighting her face. "He called you the drawing lady." Elara couldn't help but smile back. "I'm glad he's okay." "We won't keep you any longer, Ms. Vance," Julian said, rising. "Thank you again. Your kindness will not be forgotten." As they left Henderson's office, accompanied by the still flustered manager, Elara let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. It seemed she wasn't in trouble after all. In fact, quite the opposite. She slipped the envelope into her bag, a strange lightness in her step. Perhaps doing the right thing, even if it bent the rules, wasn't always a mistake. She clocked out the encounter, replaying in her mind. The Alistairs. They seemed genuinely grateful. As she exited the staff wing and headed towards the public escalators leading down to the MRT station, she passed the main departure hall. And then she saw it. Parked discreetly near the curb, amidst a flurry of taxis and airport shuttles, was a sleek black limousine. The kind you only saw in movies or ferrying rock stars and royalty. A chauffeur in a crisp uniform stood by the open rear door. But it wasn't the limousine that made Elara stop dead in her tracks. It was the two men in dark suits standing near it. They weren't chauffeurs. They had the distinct, unmistakable bearing of a high-level security detail. One of them was speaking into a discreet earpiece, his eyes scanning the area with professional vigilance. As Elara watched, bewildered Mr. Henderson hurried out of the terminal, looking more agitated than ever. He spoke briefly to one of the security men, gesturing back towards the airport. The security man nodded, then his gaze swept across the forecourt and landed squarely on Elara. He straightened. He spoke a few words to his colleague, and then both men began walking directly towards her. Elara's blood ran cold. Her heart hammered against her ribs. What was happening? This couldn't be about her. It had to be a mistake. The gratitude of the Alistairs was one thing. A limousine and a security team were something else entirely. This felt ominous. She thought about running, disappearing into the evening crowds. But her feet felt rooted to the spot, a terrifying premonition washing over her. The men approached, their expressions unreadable, their presence imposing. The taller of the two stopped a few feet from her. "Ms. Elara Vance," he asked, his voice polite but firm. Elara swallowed her throat dry. "Yes. We've been instructed to escort you. Please come with us." It wasn't a request. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Elara's confusion. "Escort me." Why is this about Leo Alistair? The security man, whose name tag read Marcus, offered a curt, almost imperceptible nod. "All questions will be answered, Ms. Vance. Please, if you would." He gestured towards the waiting limousine. Elara's mind reeled. This was insane. One moment she was a waitress finishing her shift, the next she was being flanked by men who looked like they'd stepped out of a spy thriller. Mr. Henderson was hovering anxiously by the terminal entrance, wringing his hands pointedly, not meeting her gaze. His complicity, or at least his awareness, was unsettling. I don't understand," she stammered, but her voice was drowned out by the general airport noise and the authority radiating from the two men. There was no real choice here. Arguing or resisting would likely create a scene, and somehow she knew that was the last thing these people wanted. With a sense of surreal detachment, Elara allowed herself to be guided towards the limousine. The door was opened for her with a silent efficiency. As she slid onto the plush leather seat, the scent of rich upholstery and subtle expensive cologne filled her nostrils. The interior was opulent, more like a private jet cabin than a car. Tinted windows obscured the outside world, creating an insular, almost intimidatingly luxurious cocoon. Marcus sat in the passenger seat while his colleague took the wheel. The limousine pulled away from the curb with a smooth, powerful glide, leaving Changi Airport and Elara's ordinary life rapidly behind. "Can someone please tell me what's going on?" Elara finally managed her voice, trembling slightly. Marcus half turned in his seat. "Mr. Sterling wishes to speak with you, Ms. Vance." "Mr. Sterling?" The name meant nothing to her. "Who is Mr. Sterling? Is he related to the Alistairs?" "He is Leo's grandfather," Marcus stated simply. Leo's grandfather. The pieces began to click into place, forming a picture that was both grander and more terrifying than she could have imagined. The Alistairs were wealthy, yes, but this level of security, this limousine, this spoke of a different echelon of influence altogether. The journey was surprisingly long, taking them away from the city centre and into what Elara recognized as one of Singapore's most exclusive residential enclaves, where sprawling mansions lay hidden behind high walls and lush greenery. The limousine finally swept through an imposing set of wrought iron gates, up a winding driveway, and stopped before a house that was less a house and more a palace. Modern, architecturally stunning, it glowed with soft lights, its vast windows hinting at an interior of breathtaking luxury. Elara felt a wave of dizziness. This couldn't be real. The car door was opened, and she was helped out, her legs feeling unsteady. She was led through massive carved wooden doors into a foyer that soared 2 stories high, dominated by a contemporary chandelier that glittered like a captured galaxy. Marble floors gleamed underfoot, and priceless-looking art adorned the walls. The silence here was different from the lounge. It was the heavy, expensive silence of immense wealth. Isabel and Julian Alistair were waiting in a vast living area that opened onto a stunning infinity pool and meticulously landscaped gardens. Leo was there too, no longer in his travel clothes, but in soft pajamas, sitting on a large sofa looking small against its oversized cushions. When he saw Elara, his face lit up, and he scrambled off the sofa, running towards her. "Drawing lady!" he exclaimed, his voice clear, and for the first time Elara had heard it joyful. He hugged her legs, clutching Leo the bear in one hand. Despite her fear and confusion, Elara couldn't help but smile. She knelt and gently hugged him back. "Hello, Leo. It's good to see you smiling." "Miss Vance," Isabel said, her expression a mixture of gratitude and apology. "Please forgive the rather dramatic summons. My father-in-law insisted." "Your father-in-law?" As if on cue, a figure emerged from a corridor leading deeper into the house. He was an older man, perhaps in his late 60s, with a shock of distinguished silver hair, piercing blue eyes, and an undeniable air of command. He was dressed impeccably in a tailored casual shirt and slacks, but he carried himself with the gravitas of a boardroom titan. This had to be Mr. Sterling. "Ms. Elara Vance," he said, his voice a rich baritone that brooked no argument. "Thank you for coming. I am Alistair Sterling." He extended a hand. Elara, feeling completely out of her depth, shook it. His grip was firm, his eyes studying her intently. "Mr. Sterling, I still don't quite understand why I'm here. You showed my grandson a kindness, a spark of connection that he has not experienced with a stranger in a very long time." Sterling said, his gaze softening as he looked at Leo, who was now tugging Elara towards the sofa. "Come sit. Let me explain." Elara found herself sinking into a sofa so comfortable it felt like a cloud. Leo snuggled beside her, happily showing her a new picture book. Isabel and Julian sat opposite, their expressions expectant. Leo, as my son and daughter-in-law might have mentioned, has been through a significant trauma. Sterling began, his voice taking on a somber tone. "Almost a year ago, there was an attempted kidnapping. It was harrowing. He was physically unharmed, but the experience left deep emotional scars, one of which is selective mutism. He rarely speaks, especially to people he doesn't know intimately. He retreats into himself." Elara looked at Leo, her heart aching for him. The drawing, the initial silence, his fear, it all made a terrible kind of sense now. "We've had specialists, therapists. Progress has been painstakingly slow," Isabel added, her voice laced with pain. "He trusts very few people. Yet with you," Sterling continued, his eyes fixed on Elara. In a noisy, impersonal airport lounge, he not only spoke, he smiled, he drew. The drawing he made with you of his bear on an airplane. He told his mother it was Leo Bear going to see Grandpa, to tell him I'm okay. He paused, his voice thick with emotion. That drawing, Ms. Vance, was the most eloquent message I've received in months. Elara was speechless. The simple act of sharing a pen and paper had carried such profound weight. When Julian and Isabel told me about you, about how you comforted him, how you instinctively knew how to reach him when so many trained professionals have struggled, I knew I had to meet you, Sterling said. What you did was not nothing, as you apparently told my daughter-in-law. It was a lifeline. He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. Ms. Vance, my grandson, is the most important person in the world to me. His happiness, his well-being. I would move heaven and earth for it. Elara waited, a sense of foreboding mixing with a strange, dawning understanding. This wasn't just about gratitude. The Alistairs are based primarily in London, Sterling explained. Business often takes Julian and Isabel away. Leo has a team of caregivers, of course, the best money can buy. But he needs more than just care. He needs connection. He needs consistency. He needs someone who can see past his tenants to the bright, wonderful boy he is. He paused, letting his words sink in. The opulence of the room, the weight of their expectations pressed down on Elara. Ms. Vance, Alistair Sterling said, his voice now softer, almost pleading. I have a proposition for you. A rather unconventional one, I admit, but one I hope you will seriously consider. Elara's breath caught in her throat. She had a feeling her life was about to change irrevocably. The silence in the grand living room stretched thick with unspoken anticipation. Leo, oblivious to the adult undercurrents, happily flipped through his picture book, occasionally pointing out a colorful illustration to Elara with a murmured look. Each small utterance from him seemed to be a miracle to the family watching. Elara's mind was a whirlwind. From the mundane routine of the Premier Lounge to this surreal confrontation with immense wealth and private pain, it was too much to process. She looked at Alistair Sterling, a man who clearly commanded empires, yet whose gaze was now softened with a grandfather's desperate hope. A proposition, Mr. Sterling? Elara finally managed her voice, barely a whisper. Yes. Sterling affirmed, his expression earnest. We, my family and I, would like to offer you a position. Not as a servant, Ms. Vance, let me be clear, but as a companion, a special aid for Leo. Elara stared at him dumbfounded. A companion for Leo? But I'm a waitress. I have no qualifications, no training in childcare or therapy. You have something far more valuable in this specific instance, Julian Alistair interjected gently. You have his trust. You have an intuitive kindness that broke through his defenses. We saw the way he responded to you at the airport. Even now. He gestured to Leo, who had leaned his head contentedly against Elara's arm. He is more relaxed, more open with you than he has been with new caregivers. We've hired even those with impeccable credentials. Isabel nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with unshed tears. We've watched Leo struggle for so long, Ms. Vance. We've seen him with nannies, tutors, therapists. They are all competent professional. But there's a spark missing, a genuine unforced connection. He connected with you in a matter of minutes. What would this position entail? Elara asked, trying to wrap her head around the sheer audacity of the idea. Her a companion to the grandson of one of the wealthiest men in presumably the world. It would mean being there for Leo, Sterling explained, providing him with a stable, reassuring presence, engaging him in activities he enjoys like his art, encouraging his communication, his confidence, working alongside his existing therapists, of course, to ensure a cohesive approach. Essentially, Ms. Vance, we want you to be his friend, his confidant, someone who can help him navigate his world with a little more joy and a lot less fear. He paused, then added, You would live here initially in a private suite of rooms. All your expenses would be covered naturally, and the remuneration would be substantial. Far more than you earn at the airport lounge, I assure you. Or Enough to provide you with significant financial security. Elara's thoughts immediately flew to her small flat in Bedok, the overdue bills and her sister's education. The sum hinted at was life-altering. The envelope from the Alistairs, still unexamined in her bag, suddenly felt insignificant compared to this staggering offer. But it wasn't just the money. It was Leo. She looked down at the small boy beside her, his dark hair soft against her arm, his innocent face turned up to her with complete trust. She remembered his desolate sobs in the lounge, the fear in his eyes, and then the tiny hesitant smile when she'd offered him a pen. She had, in that brief encounter, felt a powerful pull, a desire to protect and nurture him. Yet doubts gnawed at her. Mr. Sterling, this is incredibly generous, but it's a huge responsibility. What if I'm not good enough? What if I disappoint you, or worse? Leo. The fear of failure, of inadequacy, was a familiar companion in Elara's life. My dear Ms. Sterling said, his voice kind. The only way you could disappoint us is by not being true to the compassionate person you clearly are. We are not expecting miracles overnight. We are looking for genuine human connection. Leo chose you. In his own way, he reached out to you. We are simply asking if you are willing to reach back. Isabel spoke, then her voice soft. We understand this is a lot to take in. We don't expect an answer immediately, but please consider it. Think about the difference you could make in a little boy's life. A little boy who has already shown he feels safe with you. Elara looked around the opulent room, then at the hopeful faces of the Alistairs and Mr. Sterling. Finally, her gaze rested on Leo. He had fallen asleep, his head now nestled in her lap. Leo the bear tucked under his chin. His breathing was soft and even. A profound sense of tenderness washed over her. Her life was a constant struggle, a cycle of thankless work and financial worry. She had dreams of coarse ambitions she had long since shelved as impractical. Perhaps studying, perhaps traveling, perhaps simply having the peace of mind not at all to worry about every single dollar. This offer wasn't just a job. It was a seismic shift, a gateway to a world she couldn't have imagined. But it was also a commitment to a vulnerable child. The envelope you gave me earlier, Elara said, suddenly remembering it. What was in it? Isabel smiled faintly. It was a thank you, Ms. Vance. $5,000. A small gesture. $5,000. More than 2 months' salary for Elara. And they called it a small gesture. It underscored the chasm between their worlds. And yet here they were, asking her Elara Vance from Bedok to Bridget. I need some time to think, Elara said, her voice barely audible. This is a lot. Of course, Sterling said understandingly. Marcus will drive you home whenever you're ready. Take tonight. Take tomorrow. Let us know your decision. My personal assistant will provide you with his contact details. He gestured, and a discreetly dressed woman Elara hadn't noticed before stepped forward, offering a small embossed card. There is one more thing, Ms. Vance, Sterling added, his tone becoming serious again. Given Leo's history, discretion is paramount. If you accept this position, you would be required to sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The safety and privacy of my grandson are non-negotiable. Elara nodded. That was understandable, even expected. Leo stirred in her lap, murmuring something in his sleep. Isabel gently rose and, with an almost reverent tenderness, lifted her sleeping son into her arms. I'll take him up to bed, she whispered. Thank you again, Elara, for everything today." She used Elara's first name, a subtle shift that didn't go unnoticed. Julian followed his wife and son, pausing at the doorway, to give Elara a nod of gratitude. Now Elara was alone with Alistair Sterling. The vast room suddenly felt more intimidating. "You have a good heart, Elara," Sterling said, his voice losing some of its formal edge. "It's a rare commodity, often undervalued. Leo recognized it. I tend to trust my grandson's instincts." He stood. "Marcus will be waiting for you. Please don't feel pressured, but know that we are all hoping you'll say yes." Elara nodded, still dazed. She rose, feeling like she was walking in a dream. She was escorted back to the limousine, the silence of the grand house echoing behind her. As the car pulled away, she looked back at the illuminated mansion, a modern-day castle holding a little prince who had, for some inexplicable reason, chosen her. The ride back to her humble HDB estate was a blur. The contrast between the opulent world she had just left and the familiar, gritty reality of her neighborhood was jarring. When Marcus dropped her off, he simply said, "We await your call, Ms. Vance," before the limousine disappeared into the night. Elara climbed the stairs to her small apartment, her mind a chaotic jumble of emotions. She unlocked her door, stepped inside, and leaned against it, letting out a long, shaky breath. In her hands, she still clutched the embossed card, and from her bag she finally pulled out the envelope Isabel Alistair had given her. With trembling fingers, she opened it. Inside, crisp and new, were $50 notes. $5,000, enough to solve so many of her immediate problems. But it was the other offer, the intangible one, that consumed her thoughts. A chance to change not just her own life, but the life of a little boy who had already captured a piece of her heart. Could she do it? Dare she step into a world so far removed from her own? The fear was immense, but so was the pull of Leo's trusting eyes and the echo of his happy exclamation drawing Lady. Sleep seemed impossible. Elara sat by her window looking out at the sleeping city, the weight of Alistair Sterling's proposition settling upon her. It was a crossroads, the kind that changes not just a path, but a destiny. The first light of dawn was painting the Singaporean sky in hues of soft pink and orange, when Elara finally made her decision. She hadn't slept, her night spent pacing her small flat, weighing the monumental pros and cons. The fear of the unknown was a powerful deterrent, the sheer alien nature of the world the Sterlings inhabited intimidating. Yet every time doubt threatened to overwhelm her, the image of Leo's small, hopeful face would flash in her mind. His trust, so freely given, felt like a sacred responsibility. She thought of Mr. Henderson, his petty tyrannies, the soul-crushing monotony of the Premier Lounge. She thought of the constant anxiety about bills, the dreams she had reluctantly shelved. This offer wasn't just an escape. It was an opportunity to make a genuine difference, to be valued not for her subservience, but for her compassion. And yes, the financial security was a life-altering prospect, promising freedom from a daily grind that was slowly eroding her spirit. With a deep breath that felt like the first truly clear one she'd taken in years, Elara picked up her phone. She dialed the number on Alistair Sterling's assistance card. It was answered on the second ring by a calm, professional voice. "Mr. Sterling's office, Amelia speaking." "Good morning, Amelia," Elara said, her voice surprisingly steady. "This is Elara Vance. I was asked to call with my decision regarding Mr. Sterling's proposition." There was a brief pause. "Ms. Vance, good morning. Please go ahead. Please inform Mr. Sterling?" Elara said, a nascent smile touching her lips. "That I accept." A subtle warmth entered Amelia's voice. "That is wonderful news, Miss Vance. Mr. Sterling will be very pleased. We will make the necessary arrangements immediately. A car will be sent for you later this morning to discuss the details and formalities if that is convenient." And just like that, the course of Elara Vance's life pivoted. The following days were a whirlwind. There were contracts to sign. The non-disclosure agreement was as comprehensive and ironclad as Sterling had promised. There were meetings with Julian and Isabel, who outlined Leo's routines, his likes and dislikes, and the approaches his current therapists were using. They were open, honest, and deeply grateful, treating Elara not as an employee, but as a valued partner in their son's recovery. She met Leo's therapists, Dr. Ramirez, a child psychologist, and Ms. Chen, a play therapist. Both were initially reserved, perhaps skeptical of this untrained waitress joining their team. But Elara listened more than she spoke, absorbing their insights, her genuine affection for Leo evident. She didn't pretend to have their expertise. She simply offered her willingness to learn and support their efforts. Her goodbyes at the Premier Lounge were brief. She gave her 2 weeks' notice to a bewildered Mr. Henderson, who seemed to oscillate between suspicion and a dawning, horrified realization that he might have catastrophically misjudged a situation involving some very powerful people. Elara felt a quiet satisfaction seeing his composure crack, but no malice. Her focus was already elsewhere. Moving into the Sterling residence was like stepping into another dimension. Her suite of rooms was larger than her entire Bedok flat, beautifully furnished with a balcony overlooking the lush gardens. It was luxurious, certainly, but what mattered most was the small, excited boy who greeted her on her first official day, tugging her hand and chattering about a new set of art supplies his grandfather had bought him. "We can draw space rockets, Elara, big ones." The transformation in Leo, even in those early days, was remarkable. With Elara, his selective mutism seemed to recede. He wasn't suddenly garrulous with everyone, but in her presence he was more expressive, more confident. They spent hours drawing, reading, playing in the garden, and simply talking. Elara discovered he had a wickedly intelligent sense of humor and a boundless imagination. She learned to navigate the world of the ultra-rich, the quiet efficiency of the household staff, the understated but immense power that Alistair Sterling wielded. But her focus remained steadfastly on Leo. She wasn't just his companion. She became his champion, his safe harbor. There were challenges, of course. Days when Leo retreated into his shell, frustrated by his inability to express himself or overwhelmed by a lingering shadow of his trauma. But Elara, patient and intuitive, would gently coax him out sometimes with a shared silence, sometimes with a silly drawing, sometimes by simply being there, a constant, reassuring presence. Months turned into a year. Elara blossomed in her new role. She took child psychology courses online, encouraged by the Sterlings, eager to better understand Leo's needs. She found a sense of purpose she had never known. The financial security was liberating, allowing her to support her sister's education fully, and even set aside savings for her own future. She still visited her old neighborhood, keeping touch with her roots, sometimes bringing Leo on carefully planned outings to experience a different side of life, always with discreet security nearby. One afternoon, as Elara and Leo were tending to a small vegetable patch they'd started in the garden, Leo now chattering away about the life cycle of a caterpillar, Alistair Sterling watched them from his study window. A rare, genuine smile touched his lips. The laughter of his grandson, clear and uninhibited, was a sound he had longed to hear. Elara Vance, the waitress from Changi Airport, had brought more healing to his family than all the specialists combined. Later that evening, as Elara was leaving the main house to go to her suite, Sterling stopped her. "Elara," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that now felt familiar. "Julian and Isabel are taking Leo to visit their London home for the summer. They and Leo especially would be very pleased if you would accompany them." London, a place Elara had only dreamed of seeing. She looked at him, her eyes shining. "I would be honored, Mr. Sterling." He nodded, a twinkle in his eye. "I also received a call today from the general manager of Changi Airport. It seems Mr. Henderson is no longer with the Premier Lounge. Apparently there were several customer service discrepancies noted after certain influential clients shared their experiences." Elara felt a flicker of surprise, then a quiet understanding. The Sterling's influence was far-reaching, but she didn't dwell on Henderson. Her life had moved far beyond such petty concerns. As she walked to her rooms, the evening air soft and warm, Elara thought back to that fateful night in the airport lounge. The crying child, the breach of protocol, the fear, the unexpected limousine. It had been a terrifying, bewildering series of events. But her simple act of kindness, born from a moment of shared humanity, had not only changed her life, but had illuminated the life of a little boy lost in silence. She was no longer just Elara Vance, the waitress. She was Elara Leo's drawing lady, his friend, a cherished member of a grateful family. And for the first time in a very long time, her future felt as bright and limitless as the canvases she and Leo filled with their colorful dreams. The uniform had changed, but the heart that wore it was still the same, and it had found its true calling. Elara's incredible journey shows us that sometimes the smallest act of kindness can trigger the most extraordinary chain of events. From a moment of compassion in the Changi Airport Premier Lounge to a life transformed by gratitude, her story reminds us that empathy has a power far beyond rules and expectations. What began with comforting a crying child led to an unexpected destiny, proving that true wealth lies in human connection. If Elara's story touched your heart, and you believe in the power of kindness to change lives, please give this video a like and share it with your friends. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you don't miss out on more inspiring stories like this one. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What was your favorite moment in Elara's journey? Thanks for watching.